Thank you very much for staying with us. Now, Dr. Tope Fasua, looking at 1 year of the Tinubu administration, there has been a lot of concerns, with regards to whether it has performed or not. But let me get specifically, in specific terms, what would you say in respect to what the government has achieved in the last 1 year, especially in line with its renewed hope agenda?
Right. If I would use one word to define the government of the day, I would say decisiveness. Because I think I'm reminded of the anecdote of the bamboo tree. Sometimes you have to dig roots in order to fly faster, to grow faster. For those who are expecting that immediately the government comes, they will start to show results where people will be enjoying and all of that. I'm sorry to say that that's a wrong take on the issue. You have to plant before you reap. You have to grow before you reap. If 1 year is the time that is needed to do all that planting and harvesting and tending before harvesting, then I think that we should be giving that 1 year and then benchmarked going forward to see what we can achieve in 3 years. Because here is a government that wants to have a legacy, okay? Profound legacy, if you ask me. And I think that when I say decisive, most of the projects that have been done are profoundly large projects. I mean, the last one was just a few days ago. Three gas projects in Imo State that will bring in about 500 million cubic meters of gas into what we have already, increasing by 25% the stock. The plan for the petroleum sector, we are talking about adding 1 more million barrels if things go right to what we have now. We're targeting more than 2 million barrels. Apart from that, look at the infrastructure projects, some of which are criticized, including Lagos to Calabar. Some people are saying, "Oh, you have destroyed 1 or 2 beaches," and people are saying beaches, and people are saying, "Oh, everything is going down." But when you expand a road, a major road, from Lagos to Calabar, 200 new beaches will come up. 200 in every state. I mean, I'm from Ondo State. We have the longest coastal line. With the encouragement of such a nice road coming, all of those beaches in that axis will open up. Like in Morocco. Morocco has about 4,000 kilometers of beachfront, a lot of which is developed. I was in a place called Mohammedia recently, some time back, and you go to those beaches for free, unlike what we have that's becoming an elite thing. There's no big deal in having a beachfront and people doing business.
Okay. You talked about two things.
So we're talking about decisive, massive projects. The Lagos-Sokoto road is also going to come.
The coastal line.
Which is going to, it's not really a coastal line, it's just that it links up to the coastal lines about 1,400 kilometers. So I think we should be given an opportunity.
Yeah, very quickly, you talked about planting, and perhaps that's the reason why you brought the issue of the coastal, road project that will cut across, states. Including some in the northwest, so to speak. You also talked about the CNG, if you like, initiative, the gas projects. But these are, mere pronouncements, some would say. Take, for instance, the road project. It's just, government is just awarding it, even though there has been a lot of controversy even around it in the first place, in terms of the conception, not necessarily the conception, in terms of the award, the contract award and what have you, and whether there has been proper planning, in respect to that. And then talking about the gas project, we're just mentioning it, and this is 1 year after, and then we say, this government came with the mantra of renewed hope, which means there is some hope somewhere that it wants to renewed. How much of that
Nigerians have always, Nigerians have always been hopeful. We're saying that let that hope not wane. Let us renew it, let us bring it back in a bigger way, in a better way. You're talking about a government of achievers. If you look at President Tinubu, you know that he doesn't do small things. And he's a very, very difficult person to bet against. Just when you think that, he's not going to achieve something, he comes with a bang. If you look at Shetima, the vice president, I mean, the man is next to being a genius, if you ask me. I've worked with him closely now, you know.
In what sense now?
Oh my, you know, in terms of the depth of his knowledge, of his thinking, of his ambition, you know, in terms of for this country, you know. So
but what Nigerians want to see is putting all of this into reality.
If you want to probably tell me Nigerians want bread and butter,
it's not about
we want food on the table.
Good English is
which is
valid.
Which is valid. You want food on the table immediately. The point is, you want the food now. Let us eat everything now and go home and sulk afterwards. Or do you want a sustainable supply of that food, while you also work for the food to give you the gratification that whatever you are eating, you have also worked for it. So,
but
it's a chicken and egg situation.
Yeah, but practical sense, Nigerians will tell you. I mean, the expectation on the government is that, well, there are challenges with the former administration of President Muhammadu Buhari, you know, in the areas of, I mean, generally the economy and what have you. The hope is that Nigerians, the expectation is that Nigerians will see a boost in terms of the deliverables. If, for instance, you are buying a mudu of rice at 500 naira, you expect to see it as maybe 350 naira,
it won't
not
work.
at 1,500
Shafi'u,
naira.
it won't work like that. You are supposed to be, you're a very educated man, you're a guru in this thing and all of that stuff.
Well, Nigerians,
excuse me, you are the one that will now educate Nigeria, because you have a platform, you have a wonderful platform here that you may not.
How do you convince?
Let me tell you about the Buhari government. The Buhari government had its own issues, okay, but the point is also that it had one very bad luck of having come at the time of COVID, whereas Baba Buhari, it turned out not to be someone who really wanted too much stress and all that. But governing Nigeria also is quite stressful. Then COVID came. And I think that unfortunately, most Nigerians are walking away forgetting what COVID meant. COVID meant that every government in the world shut down. It had never happened before for every government in the world to shut down. You can't collect taxes, you can't do business, business can't even open. And so that era was an era where we racked up so much debt, because we didn't have a choice but to rack up the debt. And that's what you're talking about, whether you're talking about ways and means, a governor of CBN opening the vault, and which this government has come now to say, you know what, first of all, how do we grapple with this validly? Because, okay, people don't understand that, look, I traced the COVID money that was spent in the UK, $600 billion, equivalent about 450 to 500 billion pounds, is still sitting in the books of the Bank of England. I traced in the book of the Fed most of the $6 trillion that America spent sending money to people in their houses. They're still sitting there. So Nigeria spent about $50 billion. Go and convert it at that rate. It's almost equivalent to this ways and means amount that we're looking for. So becomes, how do you tidy that up? You want it tidied up on the first day of government? Is not
we really need to look at, perhaps maybe you didn't get the question or the analogy I'm trying to drive at. For instance, you talked about the COVID. Nigerians are living witnesses to the fact that despite the shutdown, global shutdown as a result of COVID, Nigerians never go hungry, so to speak.
They never went hungry because
there is food there is enough food for them to eat.
Because the government opened the taps and ensured that Nigerians kept on surviving in spite of that. The government gave so many loans, personally, many times, even grants, not only to persons, but also to companies in that era. You have to pay for it. Look, I would probably say that, look, I mean, the spin on that era was a bit, over the board as far as I'm concerned. The point is that most of us, number one, African countries, no African country has been used to managing such level of crisis before. When you talk about World War I, World War II, okay, those were basically European wars. It was only in the Second World War that America got involved a little. And, well, they used it to leverage out of the Great Depression. African countries had never been, African countries that were created since 1957 to 1960, some of them still independent, maybe until 1980, like Zimbabwe. They had no experience in managing such global cataclysm. And so what you're seeing now is the first experience. None of our economists and central bankers were used to managing any of such crises at that level, because what happened with COVID was a world war. in terms of the effect. Even if you look at it, in terms of the number of people that died, luckily not as many died in Africa, but the economic effects, the effect on the finances of a country was at the level of a world scale.
Yeah, so if for instance, a government that is seen to be performing, below average, for instance, was able to manage the situation,
they managed
the
in order to push it forward for another.
You don't government of renewed hope.
It's only logical, Shafi'u, that look, they can only manage. Look, when you say, you know what, we need to survive. Even if we have to sell everything we have, let's sell it. And then you end up selling everything you have to survive. Then the next question becomes, okay, now the threat is over. People are saying, oh, where's the roof of the house? You forget that you sold all the pans and all the wood to sell the roof of just to survive. So now is the thing, and I think that's what we need to understand about now. That it's not going to be something you walk over in a day.
What has changed?
Mind you, that we also tried. Now, what we're doing, actually, okay, so you look at
because we are talking about
the two
debt,
policies.
Yes, if you look piling up debt. The same thing is happening.
No, if you look at the two policies, if you look at the two policies that have been carried out, somebody will put a slam bang into what Naomi Klein will call shock therapy. So indeed, it's a shock therapy. In order to be put in that version, like, okay, when you go down the route of shock therapy, you want to get something done quickly and immediately, there's also risks to be borne.
So why are we not factoring this risk?
The other thing is you can say is, you know what, let's not manage that. Let us just spread it out as if nothing happened into the future for somebody else come and solve. I think that's the real issue that's giving people stress, that's giving you stress, or what you're trying to get at in terms of, so you see, so unfortunately what we're doing is to say that, look, something needed to be done immediately, and that thing has been done in terms of saying that, look, you know what, we went through all of this, and then we're still paying all this subsidy on fuel. Can we try and cover some of that subsidy so that, so that we don't keep pushing ourselves? Now, you talk about that we have borrowed. We're not borrowing like before.
But you're still borrowing.
There are two things different from the borrowing of now and the one before. Now, one of the before that era, we talk about ways and means that were not approved, that were not even obvious to Nigeria. We didn't know. We didn't know there was 23 trillion, or plus 7 trillion, which was 30 trillion. We didn't know. But it was something, like I said, of course, it was fraught with a lot of fraud, it must be said, because when you're doing things under the table, there's going to be a lot of fraud. But a lot of it was what we had to do at that time. You can't say that you can't pay the salaries of policemen for 6 months. You can't pay the salaries of privates in the army who are sent to the war front. You can't pay them. So the central bank must look for a way out. Unfortunately, I believe that the government of that day could have done better in terms of revenue mobilization, but it's always not as easy as it sounds.
Okay, you're talking about, again, Nigerians are looking at the numbers because that's what concerns them.
Right.
When you said you have to do the needful. You have to block some leakages, just like you did with the subsidy. The idea behind subsidy removal was to, stop this fraud called subsidy and so on. But unfortunately, instead of the government to show Nigerians what it was able to save, after the removal of subsidy, Nigerians are beginning to understand that the government is even paying more than what it met.
That's because
if you're talking about 1 trillion naira monthly for subsidy,
the depreciation and the value of the naira. It always works against each other, which is something that governments everywhere need to be careful about. I warned about that even outside and before I got to government, and even when I got to government, that there seems to be a sort of a mutual exclusivity between these two policies. Because in 2016, Buhari also, under government of President Buhari, they removed subsidy when fuel went from 87 to 145, and and naira was 199. But when naira was devalued to 360, that subsidy came back, and the NNPC was sweeping under the carpet in the name of under recovery. In this instance, the same thing has happened. However, there's still hope and opportunity that we may be able to get naira back to a certain level where that subsidy will disappear. Because again, now mind you that we're talking about free market kind of naira trading, free buyer, open seller kind of thing.
How does it help us as a nation?
It does
because
help.
The value of the naira is still dwindling.
If it dwindled last week, then by Friday, 500 it went back to 1,450. So now, a few things are going to happen. I don't know if yesterday or 2 days ago you heard, our entrepreneur, Mr. Dangote, say that, look, by June, Nigeria will not import 1 liter of fuel. And if that happens, you know how much we spend on importing fuel? $25 billion every year.
Well, isn't that ridiculous in the first place? For Nigerian government.
See, we're talking about several things now. We're juggling several balls. You know, you may call it ridiculous, but it is our reality. As a matter of fact, you saw that metrics that said that, look, as of 1973, Nigeria, 1974, Nigeria was actually producing 2.3 million barrels of fuel, of crude. And today we're talking about 1.3, 1.4 million barrels. Should we not have been at 5 million barrels today? It's an indictment on all of us. It's an indictment on all the leaders that have come before. It's an indictment on our parents. And even some of our grandparents.
Yeah, but
it's even an indictment on the youth of today. Yeah. Because if you look at it in the trajectory of history, that since 1960 independent, 1973, what it tells you is this, that we have absolutely no input in terms of the technology of producing fuel. We're just sitting down here. So God has blessed us, and everybody digs into this crude oil, and we are not adding any value. And that's why our production has dwindled since 1974 to date. Yeah, but 1975, we produced 2.1 million barrels a day.
But
what are we adding to it?
Why should
all of the people working in our crude oil and gas sector, are they mere just civil servants carrying files up and down? And who are the people there?
But why should a government, for instance, of renewed hope, wait for an individual in the oil market to decide whether it should stop importation of fuel or not?
You can't. What the government has done is to encourage, and let me let you know. You see, because we're trying to oversimplify things. There's a certain there's a metrics that came out that showed that refineries in Europe, all of them put together, they sell 40% of their products to West Africa. And when you read West Africa, read Nigeria. And if Dangote ever comes up, that 40% is gone. Plus maybe another 20% that they sell to North Africa or some South Africa. Do you know what that means? You think that they are happy to see that happen?
How does the Nigerian government take that credit?
So now the issue is this, that a lot is happening behind the scene to ensure that Dangote comes on stream, to ensure that even some of these crude oil, which I expect you mention, that Dangote is importing from America and elsewhere.
Because you cannot produce locally.
It's part of the trade-off. Exactly.
We cannot provide locally.
It's the part of the trade-off. That doesn't stop us. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. It doesn't stop us from ramping up production now. But look at what we made for ourselves. Between all the militancy in that region and all of that, a lot of waste, a lot of too much corruption. We see oil money as something that comes, we must spend it. We get frazzled with little dollar waved in our faces. That is why we have not been able to increase production. And it's an indictment on almost every Nigerian.
We seem to have expanded the conversation, but I had wanted us to have some kind of specifics. Nigerians are rating this government 1 year after, and what they want to hear is that the government has done XYZ to improve their life. Their
lives will be improved.
Either in the area of food security, either in
there's 500,000 hectares of wheat being planted. We import $5 billion worth of wheat every year. It's one of our key staple food. I must also give commendation to Buhari government in terms of the rice initiative, because the last time I was on the metrics, I was doing some research, and I found out that Nigeria is now listed as one of the major rice producing countries in the world.
And that was why there are sufficiency.
Whereas there could be waste and all of that, but okay, so we can say, Anchor Borrowers program was nonsense, was rubbish, you crucify them. But the truth is this, sometimes you need to go in with that level of velocity, with that level of vehemence, with that level of decisiveness in order to have things going. Just watch this government. So you may not be able to call for enjoyment in the first year. Watch what happens in year 2, year 3, year 4, 5, 6 to 8 of this government. And I think that we're going to deliver.
All right, very quickly, an author of a piece, titled President Tinubu's deception, if you like, destitution, and of course,
they use a lot of those big words. It's just the heat of the moment.
This professor, has accused some of you, people within the government who advises it on economy. Haven't turned yourself now to tax collectors instead of more like tax collectors. It's a government that deliberates on taxes. Taxing
the government
Nigerians
does not tax. What new taxes have the government brought? The last time somebody tried to bring in this, what's it called, cyber security, I was one of the people that moved against it personally. And the president saw that this did not make sense, and he stepped it down. This is a listening government, a government that's listening. We're not ashamed to learn. We're not ashamed to hear from the public. If you say, this is not working. I mean, where was the cyber? And you know, there were a lot of mistakes made in the so-called cyber security thing. Because the way it was put to us was that everybody was going to pay. It was when the president had stepped it down and every people had shouted that we were hearing that, no, it's for some type of companies in some schedule of the law.
Are we saying that?
So look, we don't need that. We don't need all that stress. I was a member of the, I'm still a member of the Taiwo Oyedele Committee, and that's the one on fiscal policy and tax reform. And our aim is to reduce the number of taxes that people pay and to ensure that only those who can pay actually pay tax.
Are we saying that the government is, I mean, the president is not in charge, for instance? If we keep seeing such policy statements and then withdrawal,
the president is going to
severally,
do you know how many MDs are there in Nigeria? Are you saying that the
Naira floated and intervened?
Excuse me, sir.
And then here we are with cyber security levy withdrawn.
Are you saying that the president should be sitting down in every MDA? People should do their work. MDAs should do their work. And some MDAs will look for leeway. They pass it through the National Assembly. Is the president sitting in the National Assembly? The National Assembly, the Senate signed off on a certain law. The president had to veto that law even out of his what he usually do. So that you can't blame the president. The man is doing the much he can do. He's doing even a whole lot more. His own duty is as the chief foreign officer of this country, as our chief ambassador. He's been everywhere. And you're going to also see, let me tell you, when people work very hard, you have to be careful.
Just be very careful. Around the world.
No, excuse me, when people work very hard, you see a few of that will dovetail. A few of those will report. A man does 100 things, watch out when 5 goes through. If he does it in the good way, and those are big ticket transactions, when 5 out of 100 drops, you'll be shocked at the effect on this economy.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr.
In a good way.
Tope Fasua. We have to, end the conversation here, but then we hope to also invite you for an extended conversation in respect to the 1 year in office.
Inshallah.
We appreciate your coming. And that has been, Dr. Tope Fasua, the special advisor to the president on economic matters in the office of the vice president. And we do hope you had the conversation engaging and informative. If you do, join us tomorrow, where we'll be back with another interesting personalities and topic. Until then, I'm Shafi'u Suleiman, thanking you for investing your time with us.